I want a big life. So
Hello, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Okay, I guess everybody's there. There's no, yes, Viviano, it is very quiet. I should have put music on. One time I put music while I was getting ready. I don't know if you all heard it one time, but I think I should do that if I'm gonna, just take a minute to let folks into the classroom. So welcome. And hopefully people can hear me now. So make sure that that's okay. Maybe somebody can give me a thumbs up or um, just say yes, we can hear you in the chat. So welcome to Wednesday. It is, I believe, a really beautiful day out today. It was pretty nice yesterday. I did not go out yesterday. Um, so I am continuing to grade your papers. Thank you, Elizabeth. I was continuing to grade your papers. I didn't make too much more progress, but I will continue to do so. And by the end of today, you will all have your papers graded because I'm not gonna move from this chair until I finish your class. I need to finish your class. Partly it's because I want to be able to talk more about the essays before we get further into the fiction. Um, as you can see, so I'm going to say that one. And two, I want to thank, I think about almost half of you were able to do the assignment. I was going to send it after class on Monday, but I didn't get a chance to send it to yesterday afternoon when I realized I was doing schoolwork and I was like, I wonder if anybody's responded. I was like, oh, how can they respond if I haven't sent them the questions? So thank you for those of you who sent it in. I know it was late and some of you confused. The answers only talked about one story, but I think it's all good and I'm going to use all of it for our classes. So just as we did with poetry, by now you should be able to see the method of what I call what is not I call like is exclusive to me, but what is called in teaching, right? Another word we use is pedagogy, right? So on what is used in teaching is the idea of scaffolding. And scaffolding, if you ever look at a building, if you ever look at, when doing construction, when they build those scaffolds, those in front of the building, there are different levels of it. And when they're setting it up, there's different levels. And the idea is that, the workers can get on it and climb all the way to the top. So that's the idea of scaffolding in a writing class, right? That instead of saying, let's talk about essays. Let's talk about essays and tell me your ideas and and then go write an essay. Here's how you write it, go write it. So what we did with poetry is we began actually constructing, right, scaffolding the elements of the essay, right? When I was asking you to focus on like theme at some point when I told you to focus on symbolism and just talk about symbolism in one paragraph and I say, use an example, explain what it is. So all of that was the building blocks, right? Or the scaffolding so that ultimately you can go and build your essay. So in fiction, we're continuing that activity. And so the assignment that was for today, and handful of you sent me a note saying you were having a challenge meeting it, and I said, okay, you can still get it into me. And part of it is like, yeah, I definitely look at it because I looked at all of them, and so I'm going to use, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But and if there's something that is off or something that if there's a lot of spelling or something, then I will comment so that you can fix them, or at least understand what was not correct with them. But 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 otherwise they're usually due before class because um, they will contribute to our discussion. And part of the challenge is that sometimes we're not in the classroom together. So in a way for you to get to be able to do some of the thinking about the work, that's what the homework assignments are important for. And if you think that the homework assignments also are the beginning building blocks for your next fiction essay, right? So for example, let's continue with Isabel Allende's. Oh, one other thing with the essays that I'm sending back to you. So I'm working in Google Doc so that I can comment and write and make suggestions and comment. Literally, you can highlight something and write a comment, right? And then I'm using kind of like, not that anyone can access the link because I don't, these are your papers and I'm trying to discover ways to communicate directly with you through Blackboard. And so this is the way I have found to do it. I know some of you had trouble opening it or have sent me an email to require access. So I'm curious because even with your OSTOS email, you're supposed to be able to access it. Like you don't have to share your Gmail with me or some other email if you don't want to. So I want to find out more as everybody gets their responses. So I usually do it two ways. You should go back to your paper and look at it. And as always, I try to start from the bottom up. There's a couple of you that copied and pasted or put the body of the text in the thread. So I'm not grading it that way. You have to put it into a Word document or into a Google Doc and attach it or give me the link to it. And then I will grade it that way, because I'm also grading your formatting and how you format. And if you uploaded the text into the discussion, that doesn't really show me an accurate sense of formatting. So I'm also, formatting is part of your grade. I think I have not done this, but I think, let me look and put this on. There's called a rubric, right? And a rubric is basically kind of a guide for how we grade, so that you could see what I'm thinking about and what you're doing contributes to the kind of grade you get, right? So like, for instance, formatting, the structure of the essay, right? How clear thesis statement is, right? How, whether you follow, intro, body, paragraph, that's what I mean by structure. How strong your body paragraphs are, do you use examples, etc. Are they clear? So you can see the elements that contribute to your grade. And what, of course, excellent in all of those categories is more of an A. And then if you are unable to demonstrate the ability to do them, then it will go more for the toward an F. So good things, still have not encountered any Fs in the class. So excellent. I'm very encouraged. So Elizabeth, to your question, yeah, it was maybe it wasn't clear in my instructions, but the first question was specifically to Isabel Allende's, the judge's wife, and that's what I talked about in class. I said, I want you to think about, how does fate work? We talked about, not fate, how magical realism works. We talked about how fate is an example of magical realism in the sense of this story. This story is using magical realism in a kind of different way. So it was a little bit of a challenge for you all to go in there. And I'm going to talk about that answer. And then the second question that was about power, that question was related to One of These Days, which was the second story that you should have read for today. Okay, so so the first question, some of you answered them for both, some of which is totally okay. I'm going to say this because again, if you're following this, so we've taken the first step toward possible building blocks toward your fiction essay, right? So let's go into the judge's wife a little bit. Let me see if I can do the speaker view. Yes, let's go into the judge's wife a little bit. So one of the things, so we talked about the judge's wife. We talked about, the characters were Casilda, Vidal, Nicholas Vidal, right? The judge himself, Judge Hidalgo. There was his mother, Juana the Forlorn. And those were kind of the main characters where a lot of the action happens. They have kids and there's townspeople and all that stuff, but the four characters for whom most of the action revolves around are Nicholas Vidal, right? Casilda, the judge, Hidalgo, and his mother, Juana the Forlorn. So, and we talked about the idea, a lot of the elements. We read it together. We talked a lot about some of the elements that were in the story, including specifically we were focusing on the idea of fate, and that's what we were engaged in toward the end of the class. So fate, and we were in this debate where some of you felt like fate was not true, that you could change your fate. And we talked about Oedipus, and we talked about Nicholas Vidal, that he was trying to do that, right? He found out that that was going to be his fate. And he was like, I'm going to do my best not to avoid that fate. So I'm going to one of the ways he did it was he avoided emotional relationships with women, including his mother, actually. And he's a man, a heterosexual man that likes to have sex. So he had sex with women, but he didn't have any emotional connections. And on the other extreme became like this really hardened criminal. And so Isabel Allende is making this parallel that without this kind of compassion, without this element of tenderness, of love, of touch, really like touching, loving touch, that your heart gets hard, right? You become a hard person, right? You become almost cold and ruthless. And but the one time he encounters it, when he thinks that Casilda, he's gonna, kill her, basically have his way with her, that that she he experiences that for the first time and realizes, I'd rather die with this, having this, or even a little bit of this, than to go on living without it, right? So that's part of the melodrama sometimes of this kind of writing as well. So let's talk a little bit more about your responses. Let me do something here. Let me share my screen so we can finish up the judge's wife, right? So we read about her. We talked about, okay, so a little bit talking about them. So I just started doing, so Nicholas Vidal, right? His fate was to lose his head over a woman. He doesn't know his father. He's a gang leader. His mom was a prostitute. She works at a brothel. He was cold-hearted, emotional, distant from women. Casilda, she was the judge's wife. She was sweet, soft-spoken, slight, slim, holds her ground. She's a mother, unhappy, unsatisfied by her husband. Right? Judge Hidalgo, Casilda's husband, stern, soft spot for his wife and kids. And then Juana La Triste, or La the Forlorn. She's Nicholas's mother. She was a prostitute, and she wanted to abort Nicholas. She was not motherly. She was tough. And the other thing I didn't put here is that she commits suicide, right? She kills herself because of shame. She's so ashamed that her son, despite her not being a good mother, there was a level of honor that she should have with her son. So, so we talked about the role of fate, right, in this class. So, and we talked about, let me just go here. I just want to go to some of the themes, and then we're going to talk about the magical realism. I think that's the last slide in this thing. Yeah. So some of the themes in the story here is the exploration of fate, right? A woman's courage, right? Her strength, right? Because we see Casilda, she's portrayed as physically kind of frail and thin, but she's strong in many other ways, right? Then there's a mother's love and courage. Like when it came time to make a sacrifice for herself, for her kids, she was like there. She was like, nothing's happening to these kids as far as I can do it. And for the mothers and fathers in this class, you probably can connect to that. And for those of us who have mothers and fathers who could be like that, we know that, right? And then the effects of shame, right? That's another theme in it. Particularly the mother, the Juana the Forlorn, when she's the level of shame, the transformative power of love, like one can lose his head or reason over it. And then there's another theme with the law versus the outlaw. So we can break down some more themes with it, but these are some. And if anybody can think of any other ones, maybe this is an opportunity for you to unmute yourself. If you can think of a theme in the story that, a theme, which remember could be a main idea or could be a lesson in the story. If any of you want to add to this list, certainly just unmute yourselves or type something in the chat, and we can add the themes in the judge's wife to this list. I'm doing the pregnant pause so that you can give a minute to type or think. Okay. So it'll be live. So if you want to, let's see, somebody added something in the chat. Let me open the chat. Come on, chat, open up. Oh, okay. I went to chat. Let me just do this. I'm gonna come out of here for a second. Oh, there it is. The chat showed up. The moral gray area. What do you mean the moral gray area? I think I know what you mean, but what do you mean? Alan. Give Alan another second to type if he wants to type. And Alan, what I'm waiting to see if you're going to do something, I'm just going to quickly answer your question. She said, what is an example of good formatting? So on Monday, after I've graded everybody's paper, and I speak more specifically about some of the issues that I see in the paper. So sometimes with classes, I don't know why it works out this way, but a lot of times it might be a consistent thing, like maybe people don't use quotation marks, right? Or um, I don't know, formatting might be off. So, but once I have a sense of what some of the common um, challenges are with the class, that's what I do. I go over them. Then you all, but I do that when everybody's got their paper, so that way you also can look at your own paper and see where you may fall or not fall in this. And then I'm going to do another example of formatting. I'll do it live with you all. And I think I'm considering, yeah, I'll do it live, and I'm see if I could do it in a way that um, if I do it live and share my screen, it'll be a part of the class, and then you can save that class. You know, when I upload the class, like maybe I'll title it "Form the class with formatting," and we could you could look at it that way. So the more his love for her goes against his reputation as a hardened criminal. Yes. So I thought this is where you were going, right, with it, because there is this sense of, you know, when you think of morality, there is sometimes a sense of black and white, but there's the gray area, right, where it's neither black nor white. And so that shows up as a theme that is often in this story, right? So it's great to pick up on that. The if we just go to the judge himself, right, it was the simple idea of how he was so harsh. He was very black and white with his judgments, and then he became more gray. How Nicholas, I think in this case, you're referring to Nicholas, how Nicholas was very much this way. He goes through he goes to an extreme to another way, but inside of that moment, there's when he discovers the spectrum of what he can experience, right? There's another way to think of the moral gray area. Um, Casilda, in her strength, was always navigating a gray area, right? That moment when she defies her husband, like that's not a wife is not supposed to defy. He was called a Nicholas Cage, right? Um, that there's a moment the wife is not supposed to defy the husband, right? That was like the rules of that time or that of that place. And Casilda does, like she decides what is the right thing to do. And she knows that Nicholas is a criminal and she understands what her husband is doing, but um, she goes against it, right? And she brings Juana water. So that's a great theme. I'm going to put that onto the PowerPoint. And I'm mentioning that also because the PowerPoint, um, I'm literally going to put it as that. Because I think.
Professor, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but I didn't get a grade on my essay. Is it because?
Yeah, I probably didn't grade yours yet.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were done by Monday. That's
Yeah, I
good.
did.
All right, cool.
You came into class a little late. I let folks know that I'll be done today, and we'll talk about them on Monday. But after class,
Okay, cool.
I put my
All
schedule so I could finish them today.
right, okay, thank you.
All right, Christian. So yes. Oh, and if you didn't turn it in, then you should turn it in because I'm gonna definitely grade today, but I'll also be grading over the next couple of days. And I'll share a little more with you all after class. But right now, I just want to continue with the lesson. Okay, so let's go back now and talk a little bit about magical realism. So some of you were using the phrase of like the lone wolf expression and doing this parallel with a wolf and stuff like that. That is not necessarily an example of magical realism, right? Because if you have to think an element of magic, that's more like metaphor, right, or description that way. Sometimes it could be a little gray, but that was more an example of a metaphor. But there were things like some of you picked up on some great things. There was like, for instance, when that whole element of Juana howling in the town square, and how those howls reached into the apartments and even got inside the palace to inside the house where the judge lived with Casilda. Even they reached her. That's an element that of magical realism that could not happen in real life, but it makes total sense in the story. Um, Let me 1 second. I'm just gonna open. I had the file open. So yeah, the other one there was like so it's important to be able to make the distinction between um the lifeless ghost phrase as well. That there is a there's a difference between if she was literally a lifeless ghost, that might be an element of magical realism if he was married to a ghost, right? That would be a thing that in the real world would be like, wait a minute, how could you be married to a ghost? But that there is this moment inside of it where a couple of you, I'm just trying to think of the other ones that you all identified. Like some of you were going toward the mystical, which is one of the things, like the idea of fate, like the whole idea with the gypsies and the reading the coffee grinds. That is one of the ways in which this, it may seem mystical or magical, but sometimes for some people seems very grounded, right? Another example was, yeah, that one of you brought up an example that I hadn't thought about, but it was really true. It was interesting how when one of the Falun is trying to abort him, she's using like she's using all these crazy things that make sense in that world, right? But in our world, doesn't make any sense at all. But she's using kind of potions and parsley sprigs and things like that to try to abort him. So these are elements that are a little absurd. Like, even the idea of like, this description of this family of hers, that they all seem like, she describes them, basically as almost, these very timid creatures. She says they can't withstand heat and they're gonna, all that stuff that so there's these elements of them. And then I think one of you or two of you talked about that very ending, that the level of not only melodrama but of like Casilda uses all the powers known to like seduce him, and and that they have this she takes his sexual experience and elevates it to this kind of almost spiritual magical level, right? So those are some of the other ways in which you could look at it. When we speak a little bit about one of these days, we're going to speak more about magical realism, because I mentioned Gabriel Garcia Marquez is like the king or the grandfather or the father of magical realism, or is credited as such. There's many other writers that are very adept at it as well, but he's been translated into just about every language imaginable, and his books have been bestsellers and won Nobel prizes and all that stuff. So he gets the cred of that. So let's just go back to, let's switch gears a little bit, and let's thank, so before we switch gears, so the kind of exploration we did with The Judge's Wife, one, today we talked about the characters a little bit, and I gave you some of those descriptions. So one of the ways you can do your fiction essay is to do a character analysis, right? You can look at the characters, you can see what their descriptions are, you can find examples in the text of how Casilda is all of these things, how Juan Hidalgo is all of these things, how Nicolas Vidal is all of these things. That's one way you could look at it. Another way you could look at it is you can explore the themes in the story. And so we just listed a whole list of themes, and one of your classmates added another theme to it. Right. Okay, Catherine, and we're going to talk about that, right? We're going to talk about how she got confused between magical realism and power dynamic. Well, because we're talking about in a way, we're talking about two different stories. Magical realism was really focusing more on The Judge's Wife, and the power dynamic was going to be to talk about the One of These Days. But one of the things that some of you realize is that you can talk about power dynamics in either one, right? And those are two different things. So let me just be clear. So magical realism, right, is a technique that writers use in fiction to tell a story, right? And that technique involves using something magical or mystical in a real world, right? So something like fate, right? That when you're born, you are going to be the king, right? That's a good fate, right? When you were born, you're going to, as Oedipus, marry your mother and kill your father. Not a good one. Nicholas, his fate, he's going to lose his head over a woman, right? And I want to talk about losing his head over a woman before we move. right? So that those ideas, right? Those ideas are like, yes, those ideas those are magical realism ideas, right? That they're something magical in the real world. So that's separate from power dynamics, right? A power dynamic it's how power works between two people, one who has it or has more of it than the other, right? And so we can talk about power dynamics if you want to, for a minute with the judge's wife, right? And there is power dynamics, right? There's power dynamics between Nicholas and the judge. There's power dynamics between Casilda and the judge, and then Casilda and Nicholas as well. Um, and what we mean by power dynamics, how does power look in those relationships, right? So between the judge and the wife, on the one hand, the judge is powerful because he's the judge and he kind of rules things, etc. On the other hand, the power dynamic can shift and does shift when Casilda defies him, and then she does it, and then he goes along with her, right? Um, at the end, that power dynamic, Nicholas is there ready to kill her, and she's just like, boom, I'm not moving. You're gonna have to do more than just because my kids, she's thinking my kids are in there. I gotta figure out a way to make this, elongate this so that when the army comes looking for you, they'll get to you before you can get to my kids, right? Um, so the power dynamic there between the two of them, like he's there, he's got a gun, he's on a horse, and she's just got her, right? But she uses what she has to seduce him, right, and to win him over. And there's a power dynamic. I talked about Nicholas in that, and her and the judge, right? And okay, so then, and the way the power dynamics between the judge and Nicholas is that the judge has the law on his side, and Nicholas has might, right? Power, like might, like violence and the gun, and he's lawless. So that's what power dynamics, which is different from magical realism. So I just wanted to do that a little bit, Catherine. And so with the assignment, you were looking at magical realism with Allende's story, the judge's wife, and then power dynamics with the other. Okay. So I just want to say one more thing about losing his head, and it's already 105, losing his head, right? So it says he will lose his head over a woman. So losing his head, usually people mean like, right? He understands that he would die of it. But also losing your head has another meaning, right? It means like losing your mind, right? Losing your reason, right? And that happens to him too when he encounters um, yes, Catherine, like going crazy, insanity, right, right. So that almost happens to him at the end when he has this encounter with her. They're like, he is so into it, he like forgets everything and decides, and he lost his mind, right? He lost his head, and he gotten totally immersed himself in the lovemaking with her. So there was a level of insanity almost that he, and almost like losing logic, right? Losing reason. Because most of us are like, anyway, I don't know how you all feel, but I think in our worlds, if it was a difference between being with somebody and you having the opportunity to escape, I think most of us would take the escaping, right? Yeah, that's what you thought of first reading. Yeah, Elizabeth, good. So you're on, excellent. Excellent comments in the chat. Thank you for that. So, okay. So that's a little bit of a swing to one of these days, right? So let's take a look at it a little bit, and then we're gonna talk about it. Oh, I will also say that what these PowerPoints that I'm doing, I'm gonna upload them to the website, to the Blackboard, so that you will have them. As you definitely should always take notes on things. That's just a thing students should do. But I'm going to take the PowerPoint and put it up there so that you could look at you'll have that information as you're deciding what to write about with your fiction, which fiction essay you choose to write about. So you'll have at least a PowerPoint that kind of does a little bit of an outline of the writer, of the elements that we're discussing in that particular essay. All right, so let me share my screen again, and let's switch gears a little bit to the next story, which is one of these days. Okay, here we go. I'm sharing my screen, and this is a small story. So it's so small. Yeah, well, let's just see. Well, first, let me before we even dive into it, I'd love to just get this. Like, what was your impression of the story? Did any of you like it? Did you not like it? Did you understand it? Did you not understand it? Was there something about it you liked? Was there something about it you not liked? like, so just share either in the chat or just unmute yourself and tell me what you think, what you thought of the story. Here we go with this, the chat not showing up. Oh, there it is. Oh, did I pop out of it? Clash, it was okay. Okay. I got one okay. Anybody like hate it? Anybody be like, what the hell? Anybody absolutely love it and like, I can't, I'm gonna read this every night before I go to bed. I love the story so much. It was decent. Okay. Cool. All right, so let's take a look at it. All right, it was not bad. All right, thanks, Alex. Great. Well, thanks for your comments. So let's look at it, and maybe I'm going to keep track of the time so that we could. So it's One of These Days by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and let's look at the little bit of the PowerPoint so we can do an introduction to it. Right? Where is this? Present. And beginning. Yes. So One of These Days, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. All right. And this moves fast when I don't want to, then slow when it doesn't. So that's a picture of him. And he was born in 1927 in Colombia. And he died in April 2014 in Mexico City. He was Colombian and considered one of the great writers of the 20th century. He got the Nobel Prize in 1982 for his masterpiece, which is in English is called 100 Years of Solitude, and in Spanish is called Cien Años de Soledad. He was the fourth Latin American to be honored with the Nobel Prize, and having been the people who got it before him were Gabriela Mistral in 1945 from Chile, and Pablo Neruda, who you met in a poem, The Queen, the poet, in 1971. And there was also a Guatemalan novelist named Miguel Angel Asturias in 1967. So it's just to say that he's among prominent Latin American writers who have received this Nobel Prize. And we know the Nobel Prize is a very big prize. And it's not just an award to say you're very good and they give you a certificate. They give you like a whole bunch of money. Like you get like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think maybe even like $1 million now. I'll check it out. But you get lots of money in addition to getting this recognition. So in addition to doing the novel and bigger novels, he also was very good at short stories. And he very often is noted like there's usually something that they call accessible, or that people are able to understand it. 100 Years of Solitude is a very long book. I'm looking to my left and right because, you know, when I was in my other apartment, my bookcase was right here. So I was always running to the bookcase and grabbing a book. But I don't even, I could show you my bookcase is there, but it's empty because I haven't unpacked my books yet. So let's see. Also, he was born, I said, in 1927 in Aracataca, which is near the, between the mountains and the sea. He grew up with his grandmother, his mother's grandmother, his mother's grandmother, maternal grandparent. His grandfather was pension colonel from the Civil War. He has a great short story that was turned into a play that features a colonel. He went to a Jesuit college, started reading the law, but in 1954 he went to Rome and on assignment for a newspaper, and then he lived in Paris and New York and Barcelona, and then he started traveling more. Besides his large input of fiction, he has written screenplays and continued to work as a journalist. Like many Latin American intellectuals and artists, Garcia Marquez felt impelled to speak out about the political issues of his day. He viewed the world from a left-wing perspective, bitterly opposing General Augusto Pinochet, the right-wing Chilean dictator, and unswerving support for Fidel Castro and Cuba. So Mr. Castro became a close friend that Garcia Marquez showed him drafts of his unpublished books. So if you notice, like, Allende was from Chile and she left. We spoke about Pablo Neruda and he got exiled from Chile. And Gabriel Garcia Marquez is one that also had, had issues with the Chilean government. Not that Chile is all about Chile. I mean, Colombia and a lot of countries have issues, but basically they have a more progressive side. And he actually was friends with Fidel Castro, who was literally communist. And I think, you know, I think we're in school, right? We're in college. So we can talk about these ideas not from only polarized, we can talk about it from the moral gray area that Alan proposed as we were talking about the other story. The moral gray area, right? So that, you know, true, there may be things that we've learned about communism that may not work or may be challenging, and socialism as well. But there are also things that are like, that are powerful and strong about them. And I think what ends up happening for the benefit, for personal benefit, or the benefit of a particular party, we tend to like make everything like demonized and bad. So I think it's important for us to at least question things, right? So communism may have not turned out to be the thing that it wanted, that it should be, but in its idealism, it had a great premise, right? And a great premise of equality. Doesn't always come out in the execution, um, but I say all of this because I think some of these ideas are inside of these stories and inside of these works. So it's good for us to kind of break it up. So here we go. Garcia Marquez and magical realism. So he was a master of magical realism. It was in which miraculous and real converge. In his novels and stories, storms rage for years, flowers drift from the skies, tyrants survive for centuries, priests levitate, corpses fail to decompose, and more plausibly, lovers rekindle their passion after a century apart. Right. So these are some of the elements of how magical realism works in Garcia Marquez's work. I just hit stop screen because I wanted to see something with some reason the chat isn't working as well today. Oh, there we go. So let me leave it open and leave it here on the side. Okay, great. So magical realism, he said, sprang from the Latin American history of vicious dictators and romantic revolutionaries, right? Of long years of hunger, illness, and violence. And accepting his Nobel Prize, Mr. Garcia Marquez said, poets and beggars, musicians and prophets, warriors and scoundrels, all creatures of the unbridled reality, we have had to ask but little of imagination. For our lives' crucial problem has been the lack of conventional means to render our lives believable. So he's basically saying poets, beggars, musicians, prophets, warriors, scoundrels, basically also people who are poor, etc., all creatures of that unbridled reality, right? That reality of the difficulty of that life, right? Sometimes. So we have to ask little of imagination. You don't have to imagine things. You're living the challenge and the difficulty, right? So for all of our crucial problem has been the lack of conventional means to render our lives believable. And some of it is that, let's talk for a minute about, that we're coming hopefully in the tail end or out of the tail end of the pandemic, right? But we were living this amazing, incredible moment in time, right? Where one of the things that the world, right, not only New York, not only the United States of America, but the entire world has to deal with is grief, right? Is sadness, overwhelming grief and sadness, right? We've lost so many people, right? So many people have died. During the height of the pandemic, a lot of my friends lost their mothers, their grandfathers, their fathers, right? People who are even younger, I know, passed away. And it was difficult for us to it's a lot for us as individuals, but as a society to grapple with that. So he's talking about that there's something almost surreal, like unimaginable that of the things that people have to weather. And he's specifically talking about like poets and beggars and musicians and scholars. He's talking about like this group of people so that they don't have to imagine, they live. Their life is almost a fantasy of challenges, right? So yes, we live in a society. Yes. So that's, and these quotes are from the New York Times. That's that little thing that popped up there at the end. So let's look at the characters a little bit, right? So in one of these days, we've got Aurelio Escobar, right, who is a dentist. We've got the mayor, and there's one other character. It's mainly them two, but there's one little character, right? The Aurelio's son. So what do we know about, well, before let's do that, let's read a little bit. I want to read a little bit and then we'll go back to looking at the characters. All right, or maybe I'll read a lot. Let's see what we're gonna do. Here we go. One of these days, Monday dawned warm, and let me make it bigger so you can all see it. Whoops. Is it gonna let me do this? Yeah, okay, great. Monday dawned warm and rainless, right? Simple first line, right? Giving you complete setting in that, right? You know, it's Monday. What is Monday? The beginning of the week, right? Beginning of the work week, right? Began and it was warm and rainless. So you get a sense of almost mood in the first sentence, right? Aurelio Escobar, a dentist without a degree and a very early riser, opened his office at 6, right? So, okay, we already got more information. We got introduced to the first character, Aurelio Escobar, and who's a dentist without a degree. What dentist doesn't have a degree? But we're gonna find out in this story. But he's also a very early riser, and he opened his office at 6. He took some false teeth, still mounted in their plastic mold, out of the glass case and put them on the table, a fistful of instruments, which he arranged in size order as if they were on display. Right? So he organized things, right? He wore a collarless striped shirt, closed at the neck with a golden stud, and pants held up by suspenders. He was erect and skinny with a look that rarely corresponded to the situation, the way deaf people have of looking, right? So in this very first paragraph, Garcia Marquez starts doing what short stories do at the very beginning, right? They are they're doing the exposition part. So if we look at the dramatic arc, remember the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. So he starts with the exposition. He's giving us the story, right? He's laying down the foundation. We're getting a sense of setting. We're getting a sense of place, right? Together, we're getting a sense of who this character is. We don't have a sense of plot. Nothing has happened yet to start kicking off the rising action. Okay, he's organizing things, right? So he's very organized. He's dressed with a collarless shirt. He has a golden stud, right? He has suspenders on, right? We know some direct representation, right? That means when the author tells you exactly what the character looks like. He was erect, that means upright, skinny, flaquito, and with a look that rarely corresponded to the situation. So he almost had a blank look on his face, like, right? So second paragraph, when he had things arranged on the table, he pulled the drill toward the dental chair and sat down to polish the false teeth. He seemed not to be thinking about what he was doing, but worked steadily, pumping the drill with his feet, even when he didn't need it. So he begins to work, right? And clearly, even though he doesn't have a degree, he seems to have some acumen, like he understands what is going on, right? He knows how to work a drill, he's looking at the false teeth, he's polishing things, he's cleaning things, right? After 8 a.m., so for 2 hours, he's been doing this prep and cleaning, right? And organizing. After 8, he stopped for a while to look at the sky through the window, and he saw 2 pensive buzzards who were drying themselves in the sun on the ridgepole of the house next door. So Garcia Marquez, right? Still, there's no action. Suddenly, he gets up and he looks out a window. So we know his office has a window. And what does he see? Buzzards, 2 buzzards. People know what buzzards are. Those are scavenger birds, right? The birds that eat dead flesh, right? He calls them pensive. They're 2 pensive buzzards who were drying themselves out in the sun. So there, he sees them as thinking, right? He went on working with the idea that before lunch, and let me just move this over, that before lunch, the lunch rain again. Let me just make sure that I read that to the bottom. Okay, before lunch, it would rain again, right? So basically, it would rain again. So he's just kind of like, he's not doing anything. He has no customers, he has no clients, he's looking out the window. There's something like mundane and uneventful about this very rigid person. Then something happens, right? The shrill voice of his 11-year-old son interrupted his concentration. So remember, his son is 11, right? So he's a little boy. The shrill voice, like shrill is high pitched, right? Papa, what? The mayor wants to know if you'll pull his tooth. Tell him I'm not here, right? So the little boy clearly is probably the father's receptionist. So he's outside the office and he is yelling into the father, Papa, like that the mayor wants to have his tooth pulled. And the dentist says, tell him I'm not here. He was polishing a tooth. I'm continuing to read. He held it at arm's length, right? He examined it with his eyes half closed. His son shouted again from the little waiting room. He says you are too because he can hear you. So the dentist kept examining the tooth. Only when he had put it on the table with the finished work did he say, so much the better, right? So there's something happening between this mayor, who is a person you would say, when someone looking at power dynamics, who you would say is a person of power, right? He is the mayor of the town, coming to the dentist because he needs a tooth pulled, and the dentist saying, I'm not here, right? And then his kid's like, Dad, he can hear you. And he's like, yeah, good. So much the better. He operated the drill again and took several pieces of a bridge out of a cardboard box where he kept things he still had to do and began to polish the gold. Papa, what? He still hadn't changed his expression, right? The father. He says if you don't take out his tooth, he'll shoot you. Without hurrying, with an extremely tranquil movement, he stopped the pedaling the drill and pushed it away from the chair, pulled out the lower drawer of the table all the way out. There was a revolver. Okay, he said, tell him to come and shoot me. All right, so now we're learning more about this dynamic between these two characters. The mayor is like, yeah, if you don't see me, I'm gonna shoot you. And he quietly, in the way Aurelio Escobar does, put the drill aside, open the drawer. There's the gun inside that Garcia Marquez tells us there's a gun there. And he says, okay, tell him to come shoot me. He rolled the chair over the opposite door, his hand resting on the edge of the drawer, right? The mayor appeared at the door. He had shaved the left side of his face, but the other side, swollen and in pain, had a 5-day-old beard. The dentist saw many nights of desperation in his dull eyes. He closed the drawer with his fingertips and said softly, sit down, right? So for a minute, shows a little compassion, right? Sees the guy, one side is shaved, the side that it has the swollen tooth is not shaved, looks like a 5-day growth. He's been suffering with this pain for a few days. The father says, sit down, right? Aurelio says, sit down. Good morning, said the mayor. Morning, said the dentist. While the instruments were boiling, the mayor leaned his skull on the headrest of the chair and felt better. His breath was icy. It was a poor office, an old wooden chair, the pedal drill, a glass case with ceramic bottles. Opposite the chair was a window with a shoulder-high cloth curtain. When he felt the dentist approach, the mayor braced his heels and opened his mouth, right? So now we're seeing the dentist's office a little more, and it was a poor office, right? But the dentist is in there, the mayor's in the chair, Aurelio's coming. Aurelio turned his head toward the light. After inspecting the infected tooth, he closed the mayor's drawer with a cautious pressure of his fingers. It has to be without anesthesia, he said. Why? Because you have an abscess. The mayor looked him in the eye. All right, he said, and tried to smile. The dentist did not return the smile. He brought the basin of the sterilized instruments to the work table, took them out of the water with a pair of cold tweezers, still without hurrying. Then he pushed the spitpoon to the tip of his shoe and went to wash his hands in the basin. He did all this without looking at the mayor, but the mayor didn't take his eyes off him. So he's preparing himself, but he's not rushing. He's taking his time. It was a lower wisdom tooth, right? And we know the wisdom tooth are way in the back of your mouth, right? So he has to go all the way in there. It was a lower wisdom tooth. The dentist spread his feet and grasped the tooth with the hot forceps. The mayor seized the arms of the chair, braced his feet with all his strength, and felt an icy void in his kidneys, but didn't make a sound. The pain was like, whoa, boom. The dentist moved only his wrist without rancor, rather with a bitter tenderness. He said, now you'll pay for our 20 dead men. The mayor, excuse me, felt the crunch of bones in his jaw and his eyes filled with tears, but he didn't breathe until he felt the tooth come out. Then he saw it through his tears. It seemed so foreign, right? To his pain, that he failed to understand his torture of the last 5 previous nights, right? So someone like this relief. Bent over the spittoon, sweating, panting, he unbuttoned his tunic and reached for the handkerchief in his pants pocket. The dentist gave him a clean cloth. Dry your tears, he said. The mayor did. He was trembling. While the dentist washed his hands, he saw the crumbling ceiling and a dusty spider web with spider eggs and dead insects. The dentist returned, drying his hands. Go to bed, he said, and gargle with salt water. The mayor stood up and said goodbye with a casual military salute and walked toward the door, stretching his legs without buttoning up his tunic. Send the bill, he said. To you or the town? The mayor didn't look at him. He closed the door and said through the screen, it's the same damn thing. Okay. So, some of you were like, it's not bad. It's a okay story, it was decent, right? So now that I've read it to all of you, right? And let's just let's go a little deeper into some of the elements, right, that we talked about. And one was we were looking at, when we look at a story, one of the ways we can look at it is through the three main elements, which are plot, character, and setting. So we have characters here. Excuse me, we have Aurelio Escobar, right? And I'll just give you one, he's a dentist. What else do we know about Aurelio Escobar? You can put it in the chat or, excuse me, I just stopped sharing the screen for a second. Let me go back. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, what else do we know about Aurelio Escobar? So he's a dentist. Is there anything else you can tell me about him that we learned from him as a character?
I mean, he's obviously a father.
Right, it's a father, yeah. That counts. What else? What about his physical appearance? Middle-class citizen, okay. Right, if we go to his physical appearance, he's skinny, right? He's erect, right? If you think of his personality, we could add to it. Like, all right, let's talk about the mayor. What do we know about the mayor? Any thoughts about the mayor? Yes, it's good. All right, Stacy, that's true. Yeah, he has a beard. Right? But just from his title, we know that he's a powerful man, right? And he's in government, right? He's there.
He's violent.
He's violent, and you say that, why?
I heard there was a sentence in the story saying that he was going to shoot him.
Yeah, right. He threatens to shoot. He's like, if you're not going to see me, I'm gonna shoot you. Like, and Aurelio believed him because he was like, oh yeah, I better pull out my gun because I got one too, right? So he's violent, right? I'm gonna say threatens to shoot Aurelio if he doesn't see him. If he doesn't attend to him, right? Right? There's also something that he did or was involved with, right? Because that alludes to one of the themes inside of the story. But he says he did something to 20 men, right? So we know, so he did something that Aurelio doesn't agree with.
I believe he killed 20.
Right.
Because he did say before he took the tooth out that he was going to pay for the death of 20 men.
Okay. We don't know if he directly killed them, but he definitely had something to do with killing the 20 dead men, right? Then we have Aurelio's son, who we can just put like as an 11-year-old boy, right? boy who works for his father. Right, he's in the reception area. Right, so that's one of the ways we could look at them. Now, the other thing, so your question, let's go to your question. So your question, one of the questions was the role of power. Talk to me about the role of power. Well, let's just do this. What power does Aurelio have? Right, the Stacy, that was good. I'm going to add that.
The power to relieve the mayor's pain, his toothache.
Okay. I'm just adding Stacy's comment to the previous thing. So yeah, so Aurelio has the power, right, to relieve the mayor's pain. Right. What other power might Aurelio have? The power to heal, right? Okay, let's see that. All right, how about this? What object implies power that he has?
The gun?
The drill.
Yes, okay, the gun and the drill. Okay, let's just say that. The gun for sure, that was what I was going for, right? Because that is definitely a symbol of power that he could defend himself. And the drill, in a way, could be a symbol of power because, he needs that to either alleviate the pain or, if any of you, I just went through several, I think I mentioned that to all of you at the early beginning of semester. I was going to the dentist a lot because I hadn't been in a long time. And that sound of that drill, it's not only the reason we hate it because we know it doesn't feel good, right? So he has also the power to cause pain, right? All right, let's talk about a little bit about the mayor. What about his power? Right, government, right? The law, right? He has government and the law. What else? I mean, I'm gonna give it that also he has a gun, right? He has gun, he has might, right? So he has that. We can look at so I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. So yeah, so definitely there's a power dynamic that happens inside of this story, right? So we've got this frail, this skinny dentist, right, who doesn't have a degree, but everybody goes to him, right? Because if the mayor's going to him, everybody must be going to him. He might be the only thing in town, right? And so the dentist goes there, and so definitely he has the power to help him or not. And at first he refuses, right? Then he desires to help him. There's like a little bit, I said, maybe there's some compassion because he saw that it was real. He saw the beard, but he says, sit down. But then he ends up doing something different, right? He ends up getting revenge for something, right? He goes in there, he doesn't use anesthesia, right? Which we know that's what numbs you or knocks you out so that you don't feel the pain. He's like, I'm gonna make this person feel the pain. And so he removes that tooth, but he does it without anesthesia, right? So it's another element of power. And there's something in there that the mayor knows, but also the mayor is not going to at least visibly let Aurelio get the best of him. And the mayor grips the chair and they're in this battle, right? Between I'm gonna show you, and they don't, right? And then he pulls the tooth out, right? And then same thing calmly, the dentist gives him advice. And then there's the last little bit of power play between the two of them is when he says, where should I send the bill? To you or the town? And the dentist says, it's the same damn thing, right? What do you think that means when the dentist says, should I send the bill to you or to the town? And the dentist says the same damn thing. What does that make you think about? What do you think Garcia Marquez is saying with that?
As in the people pay for it, either way.
Right, that the people are going to pay for it, right? And is that right?
Wait, the dentist said that? I thought the mayor said that.
Yeah, the mayor said, so the dentist says, where should I send the bill? To you or to the town? And the mayor says, it's the same damn thing, right? So
Okay.
what we're saying is that what's being implied is that he doesn't care who gets the bill. He's saying, basically saying that he is the people and that, but we know that politicians get money, right? They get paid a salary, right? And that salary they get paid is for them to live their lives, take care of the things that most of us take care of, right? And so he's saying the same damn thing. So Garcia Marquez is making this comment on corrupt leaders, that they use the people's money for their own personal benefit, right? Or for their own needs, right? So it gives you a little bit about this idea of the corrupt government, like the corruption in government, right? The fact that this dentist is living in this town and he's the only game in town, but there's something poor about him. And we all know here, if any of you knows a dentist in New York City in the United States, they're not poor people, right? They charge lots of money for what they do, but that's not the case there. So this idea of corruption, right, is one of the ideas of one of the themes of the story, how the government, in this case represented by the mayor, who's also a symbolic character, is corrupt, right? And then he takes the idea of the metaphor of corruption a step further, right? Because what's up with the tooth, right? The tooth is corrupt, is rotten, right? And so he goes in there and tries to remove the rot, the corruptness from the mayor, right? He's getting revenge, right? Because this is for the 20 dead men, you'll pay, right? But he removes the tooth like that without anesthesia, and the idea of corruption, removing corruption, right? Yeah, sounds familiar. Cool. Yeah, that does happen. So and let's just look at this slide. I'm going to share my screen a second. I'm just moving quickly because we have 5 minutes left of class. Here, share screen. Right, so related to your assignment, so we have Aurelio, right? We started putting some of the things that probably the only dentist in town to depend on him. So monetary, he had power over the momentary, he had power over the mayor and pulling the tooth, right? And the how he did it, and taking his time is the one way he shows power. I'm not going to be in any rush. He doesn't treat the mayor with any special privileges, and he has a gun. And the mayor is an authoritative figure. He's a politician. He has access to the town's resources, so he has money and privilege. And threats of violence, which we talked about, and he didn't have, what did he have to do with the 20 dead bodies, right? So 2 themes in one of our days is the conflicts between the middle class or the working class and the politician in terms of power, right? The story inspires for all who think they have power to try to take advantage of it, right? So even people who don't have power, who maybe perceive not to have power, which you might think Aurelio might not, that there is some power, there's some leverage that we have, right? So he always puts that in there. So the idea of the conflicts between the middle class and the working class and what we would perceive to be the people of power. And then revenge, right? If you even think, so what is the title? Title is about revenge, right? One of these days, I'm gonna, it's a threat, one of these days, and that's the title, one of these days, right? And let me just see one more thing. Okay, we get the characters, just the themes, good, power, excellent. So I will stop sharing for a moment. So so that is One of These Days by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, where he is looking at the dynamic of power. He's making all kinds of comments on political comments on the idea of the corruption of government. He uses that he could have done all kinds of things, but he did it as a as a dentist, the idea of tooth and rotting and something that many of us dread going to, but sometimes only go to if we have to, but we should always go to on a regular basis. But we don't. So I just want to take the last couple minutes and then I'll hang out here in class if people have more questions to go over what we're going to do for class next week. So for the first thing is by then I will have graded all of your papers. So the first part of the class will be talking about your papers a little bit. We'll do a couple exercises about formatting so that you would know if you decide to make a revision of the paper, what you would need to do. I mean, clearly the comments are there, but that way you can be clear. But really at this point, unless somebody gets an F, which is I require you to do it, and I have not encountered a single F or even a D so far. So you're in a good place, class. I asked you to wait to do your fiction essay because you got to choose between one or the other to do a revision. And normally the second one is usually stronger than the first, but not always the case. So think about that. So for next class, what I would like you to do is read a story called Cathedral by Raymond Carver. And I will, before I finish grading today, I will send the whole class that. So Cathedral by Raymond Carver, and then I will send you some follow-up questions for you some questions to answer it, and we will continue with that. And so Monday we'll go over Cathedral and we'll go over the papers, and that's your homework for now. And I think I was going to tell you a little bit more, but I think I'll wait till then. So have a great weekend. I'm going to stay here and answer questions if you have questions. And but if you don't have questions, you know what to do. Just say good night, and I wish you all an amazing good day, goodbye, and I wish you all a really wonderful weekend. And if you can get out and enjoy the weather, please feel some warmth.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Excuse me, professor.
And weekend.
Thank you, Professor.
All right, thank you. Take care.
Have a
Excuse me,
good one, all
professor.
right?
No, just okay, Hassan. Just let people get up. They're saying goodbye. We're here.
My bad.
Okay,
All right, take care, Professor. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Christian.
Bye, Professor.
Bye.
Bye, Professor.
All right. Bye-bye. Take it easy.
All right, have a good day. Take care.
All right, Viviano.
Bye-bye, Professor.
All right. Take care. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. All right, Hassan, did you have a question?
Yeah, please. I just want to ask about the due date for the homework for today. Like when we have to do it.
Which one? The Cathedral?
Yeah.
Oh,
The one
yeah,
by Monday?
By Monday, yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome. Yeah, definitely, Elizabeth, turn in the discussion response. You should definitely do it. All right, 1 second. If you still have a question, hang out there. I gotta get the doorbell just ready. I just need to check the. Right. Yesterday, I was trying to get in there. Forgot that this was already new living room. So I'm gonna check the radiator. Oh yeah, sure. Okay. I'm just literally finishing my class. Oh, I'm sorry. There's one there. There's one that. This is the one that was leaking, by the way.
Okay. How many you have it? Two?
No, don't have one. There's one in each room, and there's a pole.
1, 2,
Hay tres.
3.
Okay. If anybody has any other questions, if not, then I'm going to close the class. All right, Elizabeth and
Hi, Professor. I have a question about hello.
Yeah, I
Hi,
hear you.
Professor.
Hi, Rifat.
I have a question about the fiction story. I can't blackboard.
Say that one more
You hear
time.
me?
You dropped
Can you hear
out.
me?
No, you dropped out a little bit. Yeah, I still.
The question is, I can't see any story in my blackboard. The fiction story.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Because sometimes, are you using your phone? Are you using?
Sure.
Are you using your phone or are you using something else?
I'm using phone. That's why.
So one of the things
I'm using phone, Professor.
when you use your phone, one of the things you need to do is, because let me just see if I have it on my phone, because let me see. Because when you use your phone, sometimes there's a little arrow that you have to move it. You have to move it.
Okay, yes.
Do you see the little arrow?
One sec. When I go to the fiction story, right, it's showing me like 0 item in there.
Yeah, well, it should have stuff in it. So what I do is I try to do you get my emails?
No, professor.
So what is your email? You're not getting my email. So what's your email? Let me make sure that you have the email, because I always include it in the email when I send the assignments. Let me see.
I didn't get an email.
Let me see. What is your? I have the email I have for you is rifatahmed8122 So
Yes, that's my email.
right. So how come you're not getting my emails then? That's strange. Let me send you one. You're on your phone, right?
Yes, professor.
Let me send you an email right now. And then see if you get it. Hold on.
Oh, I got your email. Yes, professor, I got your email. My bad.
Oh, okay, so you have it?
I got it.
All right, good. So then
Yes,
check the email,
yes,
because in the email I always include the stories in case students have problems accessing them.
Yes, I found it. I found it.
All right, good.
Yes.
So I'm gonna do that with the other one.
Thank you so
All
much.
right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Rifat.
Thank
And
you.
You'll get your paper today. I was in the middle of grading yours before class started, so you'll be getting yours soon.
Okay, okay, bro.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. All right.
Take care, professor.
You too.